Was cooking good looking?
Huh?
Welcome, everybody, to An Intellectual Life with Kaelyn and Kate. Here we discuss lifelong learning and delve into the day-to-day of scholars in the making. So we're going to start with our weekly recap. So talking a little bit about our goals that we set for last week and how it ended up going. So, Kate, get us started.
Great. Okay. Well, I think last week I talked about the goal was to, for the research at least, was to read this ridiculously hard book called Literary Pictorialism.
Yes.
And I am here to report that Literary Pictorialism is, in fact, still a very hard book to read. We're still reading it.
It lives up to the name.
It lives up to the name. She is difficult. She is very difficult.
In the weekly reset yesterday for Accepted, I asked everybody that was in attendance, what's one moment of magic from the last week?
Oh, I love that. That is such a lovely, lovely question. One moment of magic. I think that there has been a number of moments of magic over the last couple of weeks, but I think a true moment of magic was that I applied for a teaching assistant position at Trinity, and fingers crossed, in July I will find out if I get it or not.
Ooh, do you know the class?
Early modern literature.
Ah, perfect.
Perfection. So let's see what comes back from that. But there was also a really great class that I thought was just exceptional. Now, for the life of me, can I remember what it's called? I'll come back to it. But it was really fascinating. It was basically about like re-looking at the narratives of the body, and I was like, oh, yes, very interesting, very, very interesting.
That does sound fascinating.
Yeah. What about you? What were your moments of magic?
My moments of magic. So I was in Cambridge last week. I went for a couple of days to work on the dissertation. I ended up hanging out with one of the accepted members named Anastasia. And I thought a bunch of other members were going to be able to attend. It just, schedules didn't line up. And so I ended up getting to spend a lot of time getting to hang out with Anastasia.
Oh, that's so lovely.
It was just so nice. And what I really love about these little excursions, writing retreats, as we call them, is that no matter what, I always end up encountering usually a member from Accepted and getting to spend a little bit more time getting to know them. And it was so much fun because Anastasia is actually somebody that I helped with her application to get into Cambridge. And
amazing.
she's at the tail end of her PhD in neuroscience, and we actually both grew up in the same area in California, in the Bay. And so it was really nice to just be around somebody that understood some of the weird nuances of what it's like to grow up in the Silicon Valley. And she was mentioning this one sandwich shop in Redwood City. She's like, oh, have you ever been here? And I was like, of course I have, obviously. And yeah, it was just very sweet. I actually found out we went to the same community college, and I think I did know that, but it was nice to have met somebody and got to spend time with someone that has a very similar kind of backstory to me. And so it was very sweet. Got to spend a lot of good quality time with her. And in terms of the goals that I had for last week, the goal was to submit my chapter 4, which I did. And I ended up getting very positive feedback from my advisor. And
what a rarity.
So yeah, you gotta clench those moments when you can. I still need to look at their line edits. Their line edits might very well be very brutal. Because they tend to give me pretty decent spoken feedback, but then when I get to the actual red lines, it's kind of makes you want to jump off a cliff. So we'll see how that goes. But it was very nice to have sent it off, be happy with the work that I had done, knowing that there's still quite a lot to be done, but now I can put it down for a little while, shift the focus to chapter 5, and just try to get the body of the dissertation written up through the summer. So that way I'm really in editing, revising mode come the fall. So yeah, my moment of magic is also that it feels like the light is at the end of the tunnel. I could see it. We are at under 180 days until I submit the PhD, so we're making our way downtown.
Walking fast. Okay, don't sing, Kate. Definitely don't sing. Not on this podcast.
It was also funny hanging out with Anastasia because she's a bit younger, and I would make these millennial, what I think is like a standard kind of reference, and she's like, "What's that?"
Oh my goodness! I don't mean to
humbling.
I don't mean to pop off on this, but Tally and I were in town last week for Bloomsday, which was so much fun. But we came back on the train, and there was a young group of girls. They were in high school. And just some of the things that they said, some of the abbreviations and the language that they use, I'm just too old for it now. I just cannot.
Yeah, we've reached that age.
Oh my goodness, I cannot do it. I felt myself like cringing. I was like, were we this obnoxious?
Oh, yeah. We were, yes.
Oh my goodness.
We were as bad, if not worse.
Oh no, I don't like it. I don't like it one little bit. I like to think that I was consistently refined and dignified.
Oh, I certainly was not. I certainly was not. Which brings us on to the weekly digest, which I think is a great place to talk about some rather juvenile reading that I've got into. So, okay, what's your drink of choice for today?
I am sticking with coffee and water
Fabulous.
today. I'm on a coffee trend. I got some new coffee pods, little tinge of vanilla in there. They're delicious. Ooh, very
fabulous.
Happy. What about yourself?
I am having a nice cold brew jasmine tea with a little bit of maple syrup in there. Delicious.
Lovely.
It's just a nice little way to spice up the drink of the day.
It's a summer drink. It is a summer drink today.
It's a very summery day, so we're locking in. But I need to know, what are we reading?
So many things. So many things. The pile on the side of the bed is
ever growing.
Big. Ever growing. So we are still on 100 Years of Solitude. Gabriela Garcia Marquez. We're in it now. I'm really enjoying it. It's so different from anything I've ever read. So I have a lot of thoughts. Because it's kind of, so it's a magic realism kind of book. So it's basically a look on history with these kind of elements of magic thrown into it. And it's really, really interesting in looking at the way that societies and communities are set up in civilizations. And so I'm really enjoying it.
Is this all Western civilization or
no Good, South American.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so I'm really enjoying it. It's really interesting. It's not an easy read by any stretch of the imagination, nor is the other book that I am currently reading, which is Claire Louise Bennett's Pond. Claire Louise Bennett is an Irish author, and this is kind of a fragmentary novel about an old woman and her experiences living on the coast. And it's just really fun. The blurb is my favorite, so I'll just read it really quickly. Broken bowls, belligerent cows, swanky aubergines, trembling moonrises, and horrifying sunsets. The physical world depicted in these stories is unsettling, yet intimately familiar, and soon takes on a life of its own.
Ooh.
I've never heard an aubergine described as swanky, but I'm here for it.
That is a unique description.
I love an aubergine. And then for my personal curriculum reading at the moment, I'm still working my way through Sophie's Choice. Sophie's Choice, goodness gracious. Sophie's World. I've done that so many times. Different book.
Freudian slip there.
Freudian slip. Sophie's World, which is about a young girl, Sophie, and her philosophy lessons that she gets from Albert Knox. So that's really fun. It's a really nice, easy, digestible way of looking at philosophy.
Yeah.
And then a recent pickup is The Tower. This sounds so fascinating. I've only read 2 pages, so I have no opinions on it yet, but I'm super excited about that. Yes, that is my pile at the moment.
That's your pile?
That's
okay,
my pile.
so going
What's your
off of
pile?
last week, I finished People in Love by Claire Daverley. You need to read this. Okay, we talked about this last week, but if you love Sally Rooney in the true, uncomfortable, awkward depiction of human interaction, I think
normal people era.
Yes, it's just such a fabulous book. And it did not have the ending I was expecting, and I love that.
I love that.
I really love when a book just takes me on a ride that I wasn't expecting to be on. And I just thought it was a very satisfactory conclusion. This is one. So I'm pretty, how would I say, pretty brutal about what books I end up keeping and which ones I donate. And if I've read a book that I'm like, I'm never going to pick it up again, I will, I'll read it. I'll be like, that, it's an enjoyable time, but
enjoyable time, but I'm not going to touch it again.
Yeah. And I'm probably not going to, pass it on to somebody deliberately. This is one that is going to be remaining in the stack.
Love that.
So
I love that.
I also have been listening to the audiobook. I didn't mention this last week, but I remembered that I've been listening to it for the last couple of weeks. This is Say Nothing, A True Story of Murder and Memory in Northern Ireland by Patrick Radden Reef.
Yes.
Have you read this one?
I don't, but I have it.
Oh, girl, you need to read it.
I have it on my shelves. Yes.
It's so good. As somebody who, you know the broad strokes of the interactions between the IRA and England, and more specifically, like what happened in London with regards to the IRA. It's so in depth. It's so well done. And I really appreciate his narrative style. I honestly, I think I talked about the book about the Lusitania last week by Erik Larson. Erik Larson, I think, is one of the most beautiful narrative nonfiction writers. I would say that this author, Patrick Radden Keefe, is on a similar level. He writes a little bit more on the kind of mystery side of, what happened to certain people, which is not necessarily the style of Erik Larson, but the narrative writing style, I was immediately hooked. It really works for me as an audiobook more so than as a physical book, actually. Mostly because there's a lot of really in-depth description of organizational politics, weaponry, that kind of thing that I think it would drag for me as a physical read. But I feel
at least it would be something you'd skim over, right? Because
whereas I'm really enjoying it as an audiobook. So I've been listening to that like as I'm walking around London, and it's been an interesting read. The other physical book that I've been reading slowly and taking my time with is Maggie O'Farrell's Land.
Yes.
And what I really appreciate about Maggie O'Farrell, and also find frustrating about her writing, is she talks a lot in euphemism.
Yes.
So much so that I actually don't know what's going on most of the time. And luckily, when I read Hamnet, I have enough knowledge of early modern English history that I know that she's talking about the bubonic plague. I know what she's talking about in terms of the kind of cultural idea over like midwives and women that are working with in medicinal practice.
Yes.
What kind of religious connotation that has and all of that. So at least with Hamnet, I could kind of understand generally what was going on. There's a lot in here that I actually had to go and look up on the internet. Because and this isn't a spoiler because I'm literally, I don't know, 100 pages in, less than that. The surveyor who has been paid by the English, by the colonizer, to map the land, has had this encounter in the wood and has had some water to drink out of the wood, and has now had this complete, I don't want to say psychotic break, but like he's like had a complete change of heart and he's acting a bit erratic.
Yes.
And I am trying to figure out where we sit and what's actually happening. I'm like, okay, well, from a scientific standpoint, like what happened to this man? I understand from the religious standpoint what we assume happened to this man, but as a 21st century person, I'm like, what was in the water? Like, what did he drink? What, like, neurologically, what happened to him?
Bog madness, man. The bog madness.
Bog madness, quite literally. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm taking my time with it. Mostly because I finished chapter 4 and decided, you know what, I need something that puts my brain at ease in a different way. So I would say that the thing about reading something like Land is that it got my brain moving and I had so many questions and I wanted to go do more research. I'm like, oh, I really want to go see, you know, what's going on with the mapping practices at this time. And
oh, it's so fascinating. It's such an interesting piece of history.
Exactly. And sometimes I just need my brain to shut up. So or not shut up, but I need it to like not spiral down the rabbit hole. And I would say like not act as a historian. So I decided to take an absolute wild card. I had DNF'd this book because I didn't like that it was so quintessentially 80s in some of its sexism, some of its racial remarks, some of its discussion of class. But I've been watching the TV show Rivals.
Yes.
Which is based with
David Tennant.
With David Tennant, which is based on David Tennant aside, the Irishman. I don't know if he's actually Irish, but he played Poldark.
Oh, he's not Irish, but yes, I know exactly what. I don't know what his name is, but I know who he is.
He plays an Irish character, and when I saw him on Rivals, I was like, don't get me wrong, he's an attractive man. We can all agree that he's an attractive man, but not really my type. But then I decided to start watching Poldark over the weekend.
Have you never watched Poldark?
I've watched 2 episodes of Poldark and then I gave up on it. And so I've decided I really need a period drama. And
Poldark is your period drama, believe me.
I'm like, he's come back to the American Revolution. Like,
yes,
my man.
I cannot believe that you have not encountered I encountered Poldark like when I was a teenager.
Oh, I will say that sometimes when I see a show that's like, you know, got a million seasons and a lot of episodes, I feel intimidated.
Fair enough. I understand that. Yeah,
like I put off Downton Abbey for years and years and years because I knew I was going to love it. And I looked at I was like, girl, don't have enough time to like sit here and binge. And I know my brain, the second I like latch onto something, I just have to finish it. Like I need to close the loop. So I was a little tentative about starting Poldark. But anyway, this man is Poldark. Whew.
Exceptional.
An exceptionally crafted man. But besides the point, Rivals is based on the Rutger series by Jilly Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
Jilly Cooper has a reputation as being the author of like the raunchy, racy romance novels of the 80s.
Yes, absolutely. But, however, Jilly Cooper is also, even though that is her reputation, her writing is actually insanely sophisticated.
Okay, so
sorry, you go first.
I was thinking about getting Rivals, and then I realized that actually there is a prequel to Rivals, and that is Riders.
Oh, I remember when you bought this book. We were together when you bought this book.
Yeah, so I read part of it, and I was like, you know, I don't know if this is for me, but I really liked Rivals, and I was reading the back again, and I was like, well, it does say that like it's 2 show jumpers on the way to the Los Angeles Olympics. I'll give, you know what? I need something silly. I need like a silly read. So I'm gonna, you know what? Fine. I'm gonna pick it up. Okay. Let me tell you.
You always know it's going to be something serious when Kaelyn starts a sentence with "okay."
Yeah, that's true. This book is the most fun book I have encountered in ages.
I love that.
It is obscene. It is. It's not for the faint of heart, let me tell you.
I can imagine not.
I would not recommend it to most people. However, what I did not expect is for her to get the show jumping world so dead accurate.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It is insanely accurate
I love that.
The type of people you encounter in the show jumping world.
I'm so curious now. Not that I've never been a part of that world, so I wouldn't know, but that sounds so interesting.
It's slap, like, it's just bang on. And
bang on.
In a way, I had kind of avoided it because I was like, well, if it is a proper description of the show jumping world, will I find that
off-putting,
like, unsettling?
Yeah.
Because of my own experiences in the show jumping world. And actually, I'm finding that while it does talk about the really horrible stuff that happens in the show jumping world, and that honestly, it's quite terrible people that you encounter, it's almost nostalgic in a way because it's not sterilizing this space, this industry that I've spent a significant part of my life. You know, I spent between the age of 4 and 25 actively engaged in the hunter jumper world in America. And it's kind of nice in a way to see somebody describe it in not a romanticized fashion and to really unearth what it actually is like to be in that space. And I'm like, man, this person reminds me of this person reminds me of them. I can, like, yep, this situation is not outlandish. I have heard the situation. I have been privy to these kinds of situations.
Mad.
And it's been a really interesting and if not in a way healing experience.
Well, I read a fascinating article on Substack about Jilly Cooper.
Please forward it to me.
I will. I'll find it and I'll forward it to you. It was really interesting because, again, it was the same sort of thing. She is kind of dismissed in a way as being this outlandish, very romantic, romance, quite not for the faint of heart, as you say, writer.
These are naughty little books, but there's actually a lot of depth to them.
Well, this is exactly what the article was talking about. And in it, it was also talking about the fact, which is, I think, the reason, and I haven't watched Rivals, so I can't say for certain, but I think it's the reason why Rivals has done so well as a TV show, is because she actually hits on something that is so difficult for writers to do, which is genuine humor.
Yeah.
And in 90% of the books that we read, it's very, very difficult to hit that humor threshold across the board. Whereas Jilly Cooper hits that threshold in her writing. And I haven't read any of her books. I haven't seen Rivals, but this author did include a snippet of an example of her writing. And just that snippet, I was like, yes, I can see the sophistication in this. I can see that.
Yeah. I actually, people may disagree with me on this, but I actually feel like the way I would describe Jilly Cooper is saucy, British, 80s Jane Austen.
Oh, big claim. Big claim.
Because it makes so much commentary about class dynamics and dress and speech, and it's so subtle. And I think the thing that most people that I've seen comment about Jilly Cooper is that there's too many characters, there's too many interdynamics. But if you're reading and actually digging into it, there's like these little subtle ways that people interact with one another that is so much based on their social standing. And Correct. Their social standing is represented in their dress and their speech and how they even are able to, there's a lot of conversation about hair and whether hair is clean.
Oh, interesting. That is very George Eliot. Very George Eliot.
So there's just like these little nuggets that I actually think are just so brilliant. there's certain women that are, that are concerned with their looks, and there are certain like men that are concerned with the perception of them by certain other characters, and I just think that it's so brilliant, and
So well done. Yeah.
I'm just having such a good time, and it also, it talks about horses, and also it's not an obnoxious talking about horses. It is, in my opinion, a very accurate description of how horse people actually are, insofar as this is not the type of book I would expect that I needed to grab a pen. But guys, in describing horse people, they're physical people, and they think in physical terms. And they're far more at home with horses than they are with humans. And they just trust anyone with any kind of learning because it makes them feel inadequate. I have never seen in writing something that felt so true to my experience in the horse world. And I felt so validated.
You were like, I feel seen. I feel this is the place where I belong. I love that,
yes.
though.
Yes.
Isn't that just like the beauty of writing, is when these moments happen where you have someone you've never met before, someone who's dead, possibly, and all of a sudden they're writing something, it's right there in front of you, and you're like, yes, you are speaking to me directly.
And I just think it's so brilliant because it's in the most unexpected places, and there's a book for everyone. And anyway, we should move on to what your thought of the week is, because I feel like I've tied mine into Jilly Cooper because I have a lot of thoughts about Jilly Cooper.
I do love that your thought of the week is Jilly Cooper. That's just, I think that's quite exceptional.
Jilly Cooper is the saucy 1980s British Jane Austen.
I love it. I love it so much. Well, my thought of the week is, so I've had, so Tally's staying with me at the moment, and we've had a lot of chats about her research, which is around pilgrimages and sort of medieval, early Christian history, and how, in actual fact, the Renaissance, which is my area of research, was the downfall of her area of research historically. Yep. But what was really lovely is that we were filming a little coffee Q&A this morning, and it was so interesting to see that these resurgence that we're seeing in the Renaissance, pilgrimages, the resurgence that we're seeing of people being interested in history, even though they were so dichotomous in history currently, the fact that they are now so aligned in this idea of coming back to what really has meaning for people.
Yes.
And I love that. That's my thought of the week. That's what's really
what's simmering.
It's not even simmering. It's like it's blazing, and it's making me very hopeful and very happy.
Okay. I love it. And what's your favorite for the week?
Favorite for the week is going completely left field. Tin fish. Tin fish. I went and splurged on some I'm a big tin fish fan. Love me a tin fish.
Did not know this about you.
It's not exactly something that's easy, like when we're in Oxford together, it's not like, oh, you know what I really have a craving for that I'm going to open up in our room in Magdalen College? A tin fish.
See, but that's the kind of shit that I would do. if I had a craving, nothing's stopping me.
Nothing's stopping you. Yeah. So I recently picked up a whole lot of really exciting tin fish, including some octopus, which I very rarely get. And last night for dinner, Tally and I had a girl dinner, a picky bit dinner. A girl dinner. Love it. And I opened up a tin of anchovies and olive oil, which is my stable basic. And it's beautiful. It's really, really good.
You and London Boy would have this in common.
Love a tin fish, man. Big fan.
I love it for you. I love it for you.
Big fan. What about you? What is your
What's
favorite?
my favorite of the week? So there's a tea shop, guys. It's a common theme. I am always going to talk about bubble tea, but there's a tea shop, and I think it originated. I don't know if it originated in China, but it's very
Oh,
popular among the Chinese diaspora.
love that.
And there's a couple locations in London, and no matter what, if you go, there is a 30-minute wait, and there is not a white person to be seen.
And it's worth a 30-minute wait. I can imagine.
It's worth the 30-minute wait. And they have done such a fantastic marketing campaign. I will say, as somebody who really has an appreciation for brand, they have come out with seasonal specials, but they've gotten influencers in advance, and so that launch is coming, and they always do a promo on the day. They always sell out, and if you go on the day of the launch, it's at least an hour wait.
Wow.
So they've done something right. Anywho, they have a location in Cambridge, which I did not know until I was walking around, and then my little spidey senses went off, and I saw the branding on a cup of somebody walking around Cambridge, and I was like, "Hey,
It's
tea
got
is
to be
near.
here somewhere. It's got to be here.
Hey, tea is nearby. Where is it?" And it wasn't showing up on the map, so I was like, "Okay, fine. I'm just gonna put my antenna up, and I'm just gonna find it." And so I walked around Cambridge. I was like, wait, I was going to meet up with Anastasia for dinner. I was trying to go to Waterstones. Waterstones closed. So I had a ton of time to kill. So I decided to try to go find this tea shop. And they have, this is a very long way of going into the story of, they have this guava jasmine tea.
Oh.
And they put like a little bit of lime zest on top. Guys. Absolutely foodgasmic. Amazing.
Sounds amazing. I love that both of us were actually food this time. This is this is interesting. We both came, I mean, totally different thing, bubble tea and tin fish, but still.
They would not go together.
Well, we don't know. We haven't tried. Not at the same time, but imagine a little plate of tin fish, a little bubble tea
and
on
then
the
have
side.
a little boba after.
Little boba.
Sure. Okay, what's the goal for this week? So we're going to continue reading pictorialism.
Sorry, I was just imagining the combo.
Oh, it would be so bad. It would be so gross.
It would be terrible. It would be terrible, terrible, terrible. Okay. The goal for this week is I need to finish this. I need to finish this damn book. It is driving me crazy. It's driving me crazy. I need to finish this book. This book, I think I've gone through the worst of it now.
Okay.
Because I think the difficulty was what he was trying to do was essentially establish his literature review. So pull in theorists that are talking about the same kind of thing. But because this concept of literary pictorialism is so abstract, it's very difficult to describe in words. And 1970s academics, they're not short of verbose words, let's be honest. And this is coming from a self-proclaimed verbose speaker and writer. I have
nothing to say.
Very self-proclaimed. This is intense. This is real intense. So I think I've gotten over the worst hurdle of it, and I'm just hoping it's smooth sailing from here on out.
Okay, so that's the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal. What about you?
My goal this week is to get 5 pages of the 5th chapter drafted. Nice. I think that's very possible because I'm basically going from the conflict of Bacon's Rebellion all the way to 1705. Nice. So I'm actually kind of worried that this chapter is going to be too big, but we're just going to roll with it.
Oh, roll with it.
I can change it when it becomes a book. Like I just need the dissertation done. We don't need to add more chapters right now.
We can always take things out. We can't always add things in. Exactly. Yeah, so
love it. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to meet you back here for the topic of the day for our seminar, which is Booktok helping or harming literary culture?
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so basically, like, I'm just putting a pause in here
Yeah.
with the idea that it would be an ad break.
Yeah.
All right, and we're back for the seminar where we're going to be talking about, is Booktok harming or helping literary culture? And I'm introducing the topic. So basically, the reason I wanted to discuss this is there's a lot of discussion online about whether or not social media, but more specifically TikTok and the Booktok community, have a negative impact on writers, negative impact on what is made marketable in the publishing industry, and therefore harming literary culture. And I, as any good historian does, I want to start by actually defining our terms. So, Kate, how would
Yes.
you define literary culture?
God, it's such a hard question. I
I
don't
mean,
know
it's
why you
pretty
throw
broad.
me into the deep end straight away. Literary culture is, at least for me, there is a sense of literary culture being writing for art, writing for art's purpose. There is, and I suppose then we go a step further. What do we define as art, and how do we define art? And I think there is something really broad scoping about that. And literary culture certainly encompasses that, because in the same vein, if we're saying, you know, writing for art, writing for creativity, writing for imagination, what about nonfiction work? What about historical fiction? How do we put that in there? And so I find it very difficult to nail down a definition of that, insofar as I do think it's writing for a creative, for the craft, 100%. Yeah.
Is writing for craft and marketability mutually exclusive?
I think this is, I don't know, you see, because what are we, if we're writing for marketability, is that a craft? Yeah, I'm not sure.
But what if you have an idea that in and of itself is marketable? So it's less playing to the peanut gallery as much as having an idea that has commercial potential.
So essentially, writing for profitability or marketability, because there's a difference.
I'm going to say market.
Okay. So we're looking at Booktalkers, right? We're looking, or not at Booktalkers, excuse me. We're looking at Booktok books. We're looking at authors that are writing.
That would potentially become popular in mainstream media,
because
they've written on a topic that, you know, is easily is I suppose more exciting or more easily accessible.
I wouldn't necessarily say that I would exclude them from the idea of literary culture.
Yeah.
Because it is a culture. Booktok in and of itself is a subset of a culture. Is it a culture that I think is a good culture or a bad culture? That I think is a different question entirely. But it leads into the debate of high and low art, and what is high and what is low art. There are a number of different ways that you can approach that question in and of itself. Personally, for me, I don't particularly enjoy Booktok books. It's not my area of remit that I find particularly enjoyable. But then
what makes a Booktok book?
When I'm looking at a book, if I'm at a bookshop and I'm picking up books based on their blurbs, maybe reading the first page, there is a sense that I get with a book that I really want to read. And
Okay.
that is a sophistication of writing and language.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very evident to me from the first page of a book.
Yeah.
When you learn to digest literature, when you learn to read literature, there are certain telltale signs of someone who has really taken the time
Yeah.
to write something that is for the craft. I'll flip it back to you when you and I used to do admissions consulting.
Mm.
And we used to read essays, personal essays from people. We used to read writing essays, but mainly personal statements, statements of purpose.
Yep.
We always used to say to clients, show me and don't tell me.
Yeah.
Because when you show me, there's a further connection. If you just tell me the weather is warm, I'm like, great.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do for me? Nothing. There is almost a sense of connection if instead of saying the weather is warm, you say, as I walked along the street, I felt the sweat trickling down from my armpits. All of a sudden, there's a relatability there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have a comment on this. Part
Yes.
of the problem, I think, is that a lot of these books are not written in the first person.
Oh, okay. Written
So,
from a third person point of view.
mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the problem. I think that in presenting it as an observation of somebody's actions, it then gets described rather than felt. And what makes the difference for me in reading a book that does, in my mind, separate it and make it something quite memorable is that in writing in the first person, there is more introspection. So rather than so and so thought, it's an immediate, it's that immediacy of the thought itself or the feeling itself or the sensation.
I mean, I would say that, yes, I do agree with you. I think there is a huge amount of connection that you can create with first person narrative. But then you look at someone like Austen, who is a famous and omnipotent. Oh, wow. I'm not going to attempt it. Third person narrator. There we go. Austen is a famous third person narrator.
Yes.
She
interjects, though.
She interjects as a narrator. Yes,
Yeah.
she creates a person who is a distinct narrator, which I think is really, really interesting because then you have these kind of biases that you have from a narrator's point of view.
Yes.
So I think there's actually something that we're probably touching on when we're talking about this kind of sophistication of writing is surface level versus layered.
Yes.
There is something to be said about the idea of it was warm versus as I walked, I felt the sweat dripping. I don't know why that's come into my mind, but that is the example that is being used right now.
So I have a thought. I have a theory, and this could be totally off base, but because of the development of parasocial relationships and the way that we as consumers interact with social media creators, we are constantly in the position of the third party observer. And we make certain judgments, and we very rarely enter into a character's purview. Like and I think that creates a bit of a disconnect, and it's a position that we psychologically take on in observing and as consumers within social media, that it is less uncomfortable to then shift into that third party narration style where it's about observation, and in a way you create this parasocial relationship with the characters. That, to me, especially when I read a lot of contemporary romance, romantasy, to some degree fantasy, like high fantasy. Very rarely do you see it in literary fiction. Literary fiction is almost always first person. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it better. I just think that it changes the way that we interact with the literature itself in terms of self-inserting and having a certain kind of judgment, and in some ways, like whether or not we lack or are capable of empathy for characters.
So, a follow-up question that I'm interested in your perspective on is, do you think the idea of that distance in readership, so the idea that you are a third party reader, you're a third party observer, and thus you don't really get yourself absorbed in the story, or you don't see yourself in the story, you are just a viewer in inverted commas, do you think that is a reason why there is a different way that social media is impacting day-to-day social relationships? And I say this because I'm thinking of a very particular example of when I was on the train, must have been maybe a couple of months ago. I was sitting on the train and there were a group of must-be high schoolers who were talking to each other, telling each other stories of their day-to-day life. None of them were actually listening to each other. None of them were actually listening and engaging with each other, because the most important thing to them was getting their own voice out there. And not actually engaging, deeply engaging with what they are hearing, what their friend is saying, and then responding.
Interesting.
And I'm curious about this only because I wonder if having literature where you just have to be the observer maybe restricts you from that engagement. And I'm interested. I don't know. I don't
have a set answer. The thing that comes to mind is people's very negative reaction to Yesteryear. That
I haven't read it, so
yeah. The basic gist is this woman who vaguely some kind of Christian identity. There's a lot of criticism of the fact that there's it's not clear which denomination she's actually affiliated with, and that creates a little bit of a challenge. But regardless, she ends up trying to curate this trad wife model.
Yes.
And she becomes a social media creator in that space. And as far as you're aware, she gets basically sent back to the mid-19th century.
Interesting.
She is not meant to be a likable character. She's not intended to be necessarily a sympathetic character. She is meant to place you in this very uncomfortable position because you're coming at it from her point of view. And what I actually really appreciated about the book was its observations about feminist ideology in the 21st century and her observations of it in a way that it brought a mirror up to a lot of like my ways of thinking about modern day liberal feminism. And what I think happened with the critique is that it's not just that she didn't make decisions that people would have been okay with, but because they were put in her position, because they were put in her head, you have to in some way find ways to empathize with her and understand her decisions and why she behaves certain ways. And I think that makes people really uncomfortable.
Of course, yes, absolutely.
Because she makes decisions that you don't agree with. But because you're in her head, you only have her perspective. And so you have to find ways to engage with her rather morally gray compass.
Absolutely.
And I've just been like kind of like chewing over this idea of, you know, why this book, it became very popular, and I think that that's partly because the main character engages in a type of social media creation that is popular on social media. Tradwife, hashtag tradwife. But I've just been thinking about the positionality that an author puts you in and how that impacts one's ability to analyze the experience of reading the book and analyze the characters and being able to say, you know, what do you enjoy in a book? And I think that's a little bit where I get hung up, is that I'll sometimes have conversations where there's somebody's not able to quite pinpoint what it is they enjoy and what they don't enjoy about a book. And I think that's just like layer one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting because this is very similar. So, in my last Humanist Readers month, we looked at The Good Soldier by Ford Madox Ford. It was written in the 1920s, and the high level plot is it's written from the point of view of this guy whose wife has an affair with his best friend, essentially. Best friend is married to a wonderful woman who knows of the affairs, but essentially manages her husband's affairs, accounts, all this kind of stuff. She's an interesting character, and essentially the whole book is about the fragments of this man's memory in recounting the circumstances that led to this happening. And it's fascinating because he looks at his friend and he says he is an amazing man, even though he's had an affair with his wife. He's a wonderful man. He's so kind. He's so generous. He's this, he's that, the other way of life and all this kind of thing. And Ford is really clever in writing this book, the way that he does this, because it is a first person narration. So you are only getting John, who's the main character, you're only getting John's point of view. You are only getting what he knows, what he thinks his wife feels, what he thinks his friend feels, what he thinks Lenora, who's the friend's wife, feels, or what they've told him. And even then, that is third-hand knowledge.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there and you are meant to, in inverted commas, pass judgment on whether we believe that Edward, who is the philanderer, whether we believe Edward is in fact a good man or a bad man. We're meant to pass moral judgment. That is the whole point of the book itself. And if I'm thinking about this in terms of Yesteryear, even though I've never read it, it's very similar, right? Are we as readers required to pass that judgment? Yeah. And how do we pass that judgment as readers? Because we don't know the full scope of the story. We are only given what is written on the page.
I also find it fascinating, the desire to, so not just pass moral judgment, but also say what I would have done in that situation.
What would I have done? Yeah. Pass some form of judgment, right? It doesn't have to be moral judgment. Yeah.
And to some extent, I think that that's a human response. But sometimes I question the desire to self-insert in that way. And
interesting, yeah.
To make a judgment as to what you would do in that situation and why that would supposedly be better. On a slightly, I guess, like a little bit of a tangent, is that when we were bringing up this particular topic, I was thinking about the role that imagination plays in literature and how social media impacts, or I guess inserts itself into the imagination as this kind of third-party moderator to how you then perceive the text. And this is where I think it could be harmful. But I can also see the reverse, which is that, for example, you see for example, authors or even marketing teams that will come up with the visuals that represent the themes of the book. When you see a fantasy, it's like pictures of dragons, and it's like dark, and there's let's say there's like leather armor and things of that nature. So it's meant to give you the visuals, the feeling of that particular book. But in doing so, you are then arriving at the text with a preconceived imagination of the world as it is. And this is also, made ever more challenging with AI fan art and motion art and that kind of thing. But I was thinking about this, and I was like taking my time kind of playing around with it, because I do think that in inserting itself, it does have the negative impact of inserting itself into your imagination, in which case you're no longer developing the imagery for yourself. And I do believe that can be viewed as harmful. On the flip side, the first time I read ACOTAR, I read the first book by SJM in the ACOTAR series, I had never read fantasy before, or I hadn't read it since I was a child. And I very vividly remember reading the descriptions of the like wolf-like characters. And I remember having a conversation with our friend Katie, and I couldn't figure out the size and like scale of these creatures, and what would it be like to encounter one in the wood. And this is where we come back to the conversation we had with episode 1. I appreciated that she kind of pushed me to keep reading, and she's like, as you're reading, you will understand the scale, because you're going to encounter these characters again. You're going to start to kind of build the worlds in your head. And at the time, I deliberately didn't look for fan art. And I had to kind of piece together this universe in my own head. But when I moved on to book 2, I did look up fan art. And then it, in a way, added further depth to the imagination of that world that I had already. But the second point, so let me finish that point, which is that I think I very well could have just stayed with my own imagination, and in going to further imagery, I changed the perception of my imagination of that world. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing or a good thing. I just think that it changed. It shaped it. But my second point is that oftentimes I will not pick up a book until I've heard that it's going to be made into a show or into a movie. And you're going to disagree with this greatly, but oftentimes it's the thing that instigates me to take the action, because I'm like, well, there's all the time in the world to read the Odyssey. But hearing that one of my favorite directors is working on this film, that's the thing that pushes me to then do the research on the Odyssey, look at the secondary literature, look for different translations, engage in the conversations that are happening around the film and the books and the translation and whatnot. And so now I'm like immersed in a conversation that I otherwise, to be honest, would never have been that intrigued by. And in doing so, the fact that there's some kind of visual media that's being made, and I do try to read the book before I go and see the film, it allows me to create my own world and imagination, but then see how it kind of stacks up against the way that somebody else imagined it. And I did that with Wuthering Heights, and I'm really glad that I did, because I think had I gone into the film and then gone back to the book, I would have completely adapted the way that I was reading the novel in and of itself.
I think this is so fascinating, because this is essentially the core of my research. This is the whole methodology of Spencer's way of writing, is to create those images in a reader's mind. And so my point of view on this is that I think with with fan art, with all these kind of things, yes, they lend themselves to this idea of creating those images in readers' heads and therefore furthering it. My one point on it is that Spencer, for example, spends a huge amount of time, energy in perfecting that craft to make sure that those images that come through for a reader are so unbelievably clear.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are encountering a villain, you know exactly what they look like. You know they're dressed in rags. You know they have wrinkled skin. You know that you know exactly what they look like because he has spent the time perfecting that craft so well. And obviously this lends itself to a time. This is the 16th century. It's not like we've got people drawing fan art and sharing it with Elizabeth I, as much as that would have been a great way to see certain aspects of it. But we do see someone like Spencer, for instance, really taking the time and effort into creating these impressions in a reader's mind. And he does this for a particular reason. He does it to teach a moral story. So he does it to engage a reader into actually contemplating that sense of what do these images mean for me, and how do I go forward with that. What I find really fascinating is the Odyssey, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Homer has taken time in developing and creating those images. As much as I'm really looking forward to seeing what Christopher Nolan does with this film, we don't need it to picture what is going on in the Odyssey. We have seen it for centuries. We know what's happening. But I find this particularly interesting in looking at, for example, the marketing surrounding catabasis.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. Because I can't remember the wording exactly, but the edition that I have of Catabasis is one of the limited edition ones, one of the early reader ones that you pre-order and it gets delivered.
Yeah.
And so the one that I have on the back, because it's a hardcover version, on the back has a excerpt of the book, which is, I can't remember the main male character's name. Peter, maybe? I can't remember.
I think so. Peter and Alice?
So. Peter and Alice, I think.
I think so.
But the quote on the back is him saying something like, "Alice, you naughty girl, you're going to go into hell."
It's such a good line.
No, it's not.
No?
No. My personal opinion.
It.
No, I didn't like it. I didn't like it whatsoever. I did not like it whatsoever. It's giving me a preconceived idea of what the book is about, which is, it sounds like it's a smutty novel.
Ooh, okay. Fair enough.
That is the preconceived idea I got with that line.
Ooh, okay, I didn't. The thing that stood out to me is hell.
I think it's really interesting because I went into Catabasis expecting so much from it. I expected a real scholarly book. I expected almost not quite so intense as Ulysses, but I expected so many more literary allusions to things, to the development of the world. Yes, because
you did a lot of pre-reading.
I did a lot of pre-reading. A lot of the books I had read already. I'd read The Wasteland. I'd read Dante's Inferno. All these kind of things I'd read in anticipation for the book, because that's also kind of how it was sold by people.
It was marketed as such.
It was marketed as such. And then I go into the book and I'm like, well, I'm reading, for me, what I would term a light read. There's no literary allusion. There's like a handful of literary allusions. It is a romance-driven plot.
Oh, see, I don't think it's a romance book at all.
Interesting.
I was like,
I don't think it's a romance book. Sorry. It's a
Okay.
romance-driven plot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I could see that.
So I find this interesting because I kind of asked myself this question. If social media had not intervened in marketing catabasis, if Rebecca had just been like, here's the book, no context whatsoever, and you picked it up and you saw that line in the back, what is would you still think, oh, this is about hell?
Not if it were a blank book.
Yeah.
But because the cover and the art and the visuals, that was my assumption.
Yeah. Interesting.
See, you and I have very different takes on it, because I think I'm very much on the side of like social media as a very provides a positive good to encourage readers. I think it goes too far in many cases.
And to be honest, I think you and I are the same in that opinion. I think it's really good to see that so many people are reading and so many people have picked up reading. I love to see that. I do love to see that. My concern for it comes in if historians were to look back on our time period, we look back on the 18th century, for instance. We look back on the 18th century and we look at Jane Austen and we look at Charlotte Bronte and George Eliot and all these phenomenal
19th century.
Sorry, I'm getting my centuries confused here.
That's okay.
19th century, you're quite right. We look back on those periods and we've got these exceptional pieces of writing, and they weren't popular books, but they were popular. They became popular. They did become, when they were published, they weren't popular. They did become popular. I'm curious that if in the future, literary scholars look back on this period of literature, and they look at the popular authors.
Yeah.
They look at Sarah J. Maas, for instance.
Yeah.
Is that defining what our literary culture is for the period?
Ooh.
Yeah.
What defines a literary moment? What defines literary culture of a time? Interesting. Is literary culture what people were reading? Or is it something that you think defines the period? Because I would say the literature that I would point to as defining this particular moment is more so the dystopian fiction that's coming out as a kind of reaction to the political unrest.
Interesting.
That's what I would say is more kind of directly responding to, but also, yeah, it is responding to social media in a unique way. I don't think there's I don't think that there's a specific answer, and that's what this podcast is.
I mean, that's why this is such a rich topic, right? Because, and we are coming at it from two different angles. I'm coming at it as a literary scholar who will look at particular kind of reading, and the way that I read is based on my training, is based on the fact that I look for that engagement. I look for those layers. That's what I want out of a piece of writing, is almost that puzzle where I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That's a really smart craft,
I was talking to somebody, this is a bit of a tangent, but I think it's relevant. I was having a conversation with Anastasia when we were in Cambridge, and we were talking about social media and comparison. And I said that I don't really compare as much because I'm so aware of the strategy. I'm like so aware of, how this fits into somebody's social media marketing strategy. How is it filmed? How was it edited? why did they use certain transitions? What kind of campaign is this working up to? It looks like they're preparing for this kind of collaboration, like those types of things. That's what I think about when I'm looking at social media. And it's, in a way, when you take like a film class, and it suddenly, like you see angles of films and you're suddenly very aware that it's a film being made versus, something that's just happening. And I remember having the same kind of sensation when I took a Jane Austen class when I was studying abroad at Cambridge. And I actually really didn't like that I was given all of these lenses to analyze, because it was distracting from what I found to be the kind of just genuine pleasure of enjoying a story. And there are times when I will, and this, I guess, like this brings us back to the difference between reading Land and reading Writers, is that there's part of my brain that just doesn't turn off when I'm reading certain types of texts. And sometimes I want that. Sometimes I want that analysis, and I want to think in these, these layers. And then there are times when I just want to enjoy the book. Do you find that you can turn it off, or you're always looking to a book to show off those layers?
No, I'm definitely, there are times where I'm looking for, I suppose, what I would call like a palate cleanser book. And but I have noticed within myself is that my palate cleanser books are, and you know this about me, I tried Sarah J. Maas. I really did. I put in the effort. I just couldn't do it. It would be, I suppose, the equivalent of, I really can't give this analogy quite well, but it would be the equivalent of like me asking you to ride in a pair of shoes that were too small.
Fair enough.
When you're trying to do something that you enjoy.
Yeah.
But it's so discomforting. That is what it feels like for me, is when I try and read something that I can just see has been, no thought has kind of gone into that craft and no thought has gone into the writing. It's interesting for me to engage in that way, but I do need a palate cleanser read. I cannot read all of these heavy books without.
Are you able to comprehend why it's popular? Like why?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Okay. And this is where I kind of I come up against my own prejudices. My own biases when it comes to this kind of thing, is that I know I'm coming at it from someone who can deconstruct a sentence very clearly, whereas reading is pleasurable. Reading is about enjoying the story. Storytelling has developed from years and years and years of entertainment. That's essentially where it comes from. It's this idea that it should be entertaining. Yes, should that entertainment contain stories, contain morals, contain lessons? I mean, that's what Aristotle argues at the end of the day, is that stories are more pleasurable if they teach you something. That's essentially what he says. Whether that's true or not, I think we could debate that on a different level.
I think there's always something you can learn. I was having a conversation.
There's always something, yeah.
I was having a conversation with somebody last week about they saw a shelf of romance books and they're like, "Oh, I don't read that. I would never read any of that." And I was like, let's just dissect that for a second. Like, what have you read? Why didn't you get on with it? Like, what is your assumption about the books on this shelf?
Correct. Yeah. I don't like that. I don't like anyone saying they don't like it without first trying it.
Yeah.
I don't like just dismissing groups of literature without trying it, because you just never know what you will find.
Agreed.
In reading something that's out of your comfort. This goes back to what we were talking about yesterday, reading something that's outside of your comfort zone.
Yes. I also think it's so much about opening yourself up to learning something.
Yes.
Anything.
Yeah.
you know, I'll sometimes read contemporary romance novels, and they follow a very kind of standard 3-part structure, most of them. The very commercial romance novels. And it tells me something about plotting. And why, you know, that 3-act scene, the 3rd act breakup, all those kinds of things, why it works, and why it would in a way be necessary to get the arc of the book where it needs to be. But because I'm aware of that structure, I'm really excited when I see it broken. And that's why I really like the Claire Daverley book.
So this is interesting because there is 90% of books that have been published in the last couple of years follow, for want of a better term, follow a template. They follow a structure. And that structure is actually emulated in the way we consume social media.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this quick fire catch in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on? It kind of dims towards the middle. There is a height. There's an increase in intrigue 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah.
You've got the height of the book, and then you've got the cliffhanger to buy the next book.
Yep.
And social media, if you're putting together a reel or a post or something like that, it follows the same formula. It follows the catch, follows the gist, follows the height, follow more for, the next kind of content. I'm curious if you find what you've just said now, which I really love, is that structure exists. You get really excited when something deviates from that structure, because all of a sudden there is an intrigue. You know what the structure is, and you find an intrigue. Do you think the fact that novels, or maybe not, do you think the fact that books that adopt that kind of formula, because they know it's going to sell, this goes back to your first question, books that adopt that kind of formula know that they are going to sell, do you then think those kind of books are part of I suppose, our literary culture? How do you view those kind of books that are there? They put that formula in place to be sold.
Ooh.
And the reason I'm asking, just to add, further context to this, is because there is debate within literary fiction space of the fact that we are quick producing art in novels at the moment. We're spitting out work that is not conducive to the craft, because ultimately most writers would say, that it takes them a long time to write a book. It's not something that can just be spit out.
So I think it's the challenge is what is it? The Ouroboros, the snake that's like eating its tail.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think of the publishing industry as that in a way, the problem is that the publishing industry is following market. Market is determining what gets published, and so therefore what gets sold. And that is then shaping what writers are, creating to send into the publishing pipeline. And then we have no disruption to that cyclical process in which someone has a particular kind of marketability and then decides to break it. From a strategy point of view, I think it ends up having to come from somebody who has legacy within the publishing industry to shake things up. I don't think it can be somebody that's a debut author. I think it comes from somebody that has some degree of legacy, that basically goes to their publisher and says, I will not publish another book unless we do it this way. And because they have marketability, they can then change the market by creating a piece of work that is different. I think it's very difficult from an indie and from a debut perspective to change that culture, because there's not buy-in. But that's my theory. As somebody who's like a strategist in terms of marketing, that's that's where I think it has to come. And that's why I really appreciate some of the conversations that I'm seeing happening in the publishing space, is an acknowledgement that there are certain people that are within that have to be the ones to kind of break the cycle
Break the cycle. Yeah.
And move us in a direction whereby, now that you have certain kinds of market leverage, you can be the one to break out of it and say, you know, we're going to write something that's quite unique. We're going to write something that's a bit longer. We're going to write something that takes a side angle off of these tropes. I think the other thing is that it's all about what we consume and how we consume. And that's why you and I wanted to start this podcast, is you have to be conscious of what you're consuming, because as an artist, as a writer, you have to be aware that, you know, in engaging in the media that is creating and engaging this cycle and feeding that cycle, you're never going to have the creative capacity to do something and create something unique. And that's where, you know, having a diverse set of influences and inputs and taking time away from mass media is something that, you know, it makes it possible that somebody can actually create a piece of art that is unique in and of itself.
I think it's a really, really interesting thing, because I totally agree with you. The strategy, especially the strategy that I'm seeing from debut authors at the moment, is we have to fit this bill, otherwise it's just not going to get published. I still have this, I suppose, glimmer of hope for unique creativity or unique art, or breaking that mold from the get-go, when I look at A Ghost in the Throat.
Yes.
For instance.
So she's a fantastic example.
She's a fantastic example. She never conformed. She published indie. Tramp Press was the publisher of A Ghost in the Throat. She stayed true to the craft, and it gained international acclaim and accreditation for the work. It took her 6 years to publish Said the Dead now, but through a big publishing house. But she'd already established her name, even though she hadn't conformed to that formula.
I think you can do both things at once. I think that it's not necessarily just play to the peanut gallery from the very beginning and mold yourself just to marketability. I think that there's a coupling between like grassroots idea formation and using things like newsletters, using things like Substack, using, you know, literary salons, local like poetry clubs, and, you know, what is it, spoken
word,
spoken word presentation, like using the tools and the community and the space at your disposal to continue to craft your art as you wish it to be. And also creating something that is going to get you in the door. And I think about this even with academia.
I was just thinking the same. I was just thinking about it, the same thing.
I feel like that's a conversation we need to save for another day.
Absolutely. We've just run out of time. I do think it's interesting that what I'm starting to see in the publishing houses and what is coming out is, yes, we are still getting a lot of the formulaic books.
We're seeing more experiments.
But we're seeing so many more experiments, and I am just loving that. I wonder if, which makes me very excited, is that the general readership populace is a bit bored of the formula, and they're looking for that new experimental idea. And maybe that is the disruption. Maybe the fact that there has been this formulaic repetition in literary culture for so long, all of a sudden we are starting to see that disruption. Whether it's coming from internal or external, it is responding. And I'm loving seeing that. I'm here for that disruption. So here for that disruption.
Okay, I have one final thought to wrap us up, which is that you have so much agency in also shaping literary culture. And by sitting back and being disrupted, like being frustrated by the lack of publication of books that suit your desire, promote the books that do, support the authors that do.
Absolutely.
Look out for indie authors that are doing grassroots work, thinking about the structure of a novel, thinking about producing, stuff that isn't as commercially exciting to most, which is, things like short stories, poetry, shorter essays. Be somebody who is going to champion that work. Don't just sit back.
Yes.
Use the platform that you have, use the tools like Booktok to change the culture, because I've seen it. For example, the return to Steinbeck is abundant at the moment. And
yes.
that is simply because somebody was able to create content that brought attention back to
Steinbeck. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I even think there is something to be said about and this is a whole nother podcast itself, but that idea that Wuthering Heights boomed in publication because of Emerald Fennell. But that is a different
that is a conversation.
That is a different conversation.
Well, thank you, Kate, and thank you to everybody listening. This was our second episode of Living an Intellectual Life. We look forward to seeing you all next week. Be sure to tune in and subscribe. And because if you are listening to this on Substack, you are actually able to leave a comment. We would love to know your thoughts on today's conversation. We'll see you all next week. Bye, friends.